You are listening to One Happy Podcast, episode 44. The episode where we talk about how to beat the post-vacation blues, including how to tell if you have them, how to combat them, and if all else fails, a foolproof way of getting out of post-Aruba Sadness Disorder. Bon dia and welcome to One Happy Podcast, the officially unofficial podcast of the island of Aruba. I'm your host, Curtis Robinson, aka Aruba Kurt. And before we get started, as always, I want to thank you guys so much for being the most incredible audience that an Aruba podcaster could ever hope for. In fact, you guys are so awesome that I decided to start a Facebook group for listeners of the podcast. And that's going to be a secret group, actually. I mean, it's not a secret if you listen to the podcast, but it won't be discoverable through Facebook search. So keep your eyes out for invitations that are going to be going out. That's right. At the beginning, I'm only going to, and maybe permanently, I'm only going to make it invitation only. That way I can be sure that, all the ruffians stay away. Now, these invites will be trickling out, but if they're not getting to you fast enough, just send me a message via email, kurt@onehappypodcast.com, or on Facebook, and I'll be sure to prioritize your invitation. So I'm pretty excited about that, but for now, let's get on to the show. Now, I actually have to apologize because if I'm not my normal enthusiastic self, it's because I'm feeling a little bit under the weather. You see, I just returned from Aruba about a week ago as of me recording this episode, and I think I picked up something down there. Don't worry, it wasn't the Zika virus or dengue fever or however you say it. It wasn't one of those overhyped media blown out of proportion diseases. Not that those aren't real, I just think the media blows everything out of proportion. What I have is a very real and very serious thing. In fact, if you visit Aruba, there's a certainty that you will at some point in time get what I have right now. The illness that I'm talking about is, of course, post-Aruba Sadness Disorder, or PASD. You may also know it by its common name, the post-vacation blues. You see, I got it pretty bad. It's got a hold of me and it won't let go. I've done everything to try and shake it. Now that it's finally starting to work, I figured I would share with you guys and let this be an instance of my pain being you guys' gain. I'm sure many of you listening know exactly how hard it is to shake post-Aruba Sadness Disorder. However, if you have been able to avoid it up until now, let me explain to you exactly what it is. Post-Aruba Sadness Disorder, or PASD, is a short to medium-term affliction that develops when travelers return to their real lives after having been immersed in the awesomeness that is Aruba. When visiting a place as perfect as the island of Aruba, it's nearly impossible to avoid being enveloped by a natural sense of euphoria. And the longer the exposure to Aruba, the more this feeling infiltrates every cell of your being until eventually you're totally at peace with, everything. And depending on how long you're on the island, you may even begin to think it's your real life. Well, most likely it's not. Although it can be, but that's another show for another time. Your real life is most likely working, cooking, cleaning, yard work, and weather that cannot possibly touch what you experience while on the island. So you can see why PASD touches nearly everyone who visits the island. In a nutshell, most of us live in the real world, not in paradise. So what are some of the signs and symptoms of PASD? Well, not all, but nearly all those who visit Aruba will experience PASD at some point. Onset is fast. Symptoms usually start to appear before you even leave the island. Most will not even make it onto the plane before experiencing feelings of discomfort. Let me ask you something. Are you familiar with the crying room? The crying room is the waiting area in the airport where all of those who are on their way back to the real world sit and watch new arrivals to the island. Admit it, when you first deplane, you look over and you see all those sad people in that room thinking, wow, they all look so miserable. Seriously, purgatory probably looks a lot like the crying room. Just a sea of sad people just waiting. Well, that's where it all starts. You start to think about the fact that you have to grocery shop, what time you have to get up for work in the morning, and God forbid you decide to check your work email. You're just asking for trouble. Before you know it, you're on the plane and heading back to real life. So, I bet you want to know how one is diagnosed with PASD. Well, I found this little quiz online. There's only one question to it. Which of the following do you do when you get back home from a spectacular trip to Aruba? A. Go to bed, even after you've recovered from your flight. B. Have a beer or 2 or 3, and ignore your pile of bills for a week. C. Turn on the Travel Channel and leave it on after you've gone to bed. D. Look around your home with subtle disgust and distaste. Or E. 2 or more of the above. Well, basically, if you chose any of those answers, there's a good chance you have been infected with the bug. Ending a trip to Aruba is without a doubt rewarding because you were lucky enough to have been there in the first place. However, needing to flip the switch back to the real world can be seriously draining. Spending days, weeks, or if you're lucky, months on one happy island makes it challenging to not succumb to a case of the blues when you're faced with the realities of your real-world responsibilities. Now, normally I can stave off PASD pretty well, but this time it just took a hold of me. Pretty much from the moment I left the island, I've been in a funk. This funk has led me to try all different types of recommended remedies, and while I've experienced varying degrees of success, none of them have been a complete cure, but different things work for different people, so I figured I would list a few different ways to fight off or cure post-Aruba Sadness Disorder, PASD. Tie up loose vacation ends. Unpack. Seriously, don't put this off. Unpack your stuff as soon as possible. Unfortunately for me, I didn't arrive home until after 9 p.m., so this wasn't really an option. But if it's at all possible, just get it over with. Human beings have this amazing ability to convince themselves of anything, such as convincing yourself that unpacking tomorrow is perfectly fine. The problem is unpacking sucks. And it's going to suck even more the longer you put it off. No one likes to slam the door shut on vacation, which is exactly what unpacking is doing. But each minute, each hour, each day you let that full suitcase sit in the corner of your bedroom, it's just more time that you're spending in denial. Okay, now that you've unpacked, it's probably time to do some laundry. The place we rent has a washing machine, so when we arrive home, my suitcase is normally filled with clean and fresh-smelling clothing. However, the majority of vacationers, when they come back to reality, usually arrive with a suitcase filled with dirty vacation clothes. And now that you've taken them out of their luggage, don't just leave them in the hamper because that's nearly as bad as never having unpacked in the first place. Just take the time to wash, dry, and fold your clothes. Not only is it a necessary chore, but it's a great excuse for drinking a glass of wine and reminiscing. Now that you're back home, you're probably going to want to make certain that everything's okay financially. Now, I usually put everything on plastic and pay it off as soon as I return. However, before you do that, you're going to want to make sure you received everything you're about to pay for. Actually, it's better just to keep up with it while you're on vacation, but it's understandable if you aren't as meticulous after that bottle of wine as you normally would be. So check it out now. That way you can dispute any fraudulent charges if there are any. Also, if you set a budget that you ended up exceeding, it's probably best to know about that right away. Okay, now that you've settled all of your trip stuff, it's time to get your house in order. And for me, that usually starts with grocery shopping. Now, before I go on vacation, I eat or give away darn near everything in the fridge. It's not going to do me any good while I'm away, and depending on what it is, it'll be bad by the time I get back. So, if you're anything like me, your fridge is most likely empty when you return. And if you aren't like me and didn't clean out the fridge, at least it'll be easy for you to tell where that smell's coming from, so you'll want to clean it before you head to the grocery store. Now, in the real world, we don't eat out all the time, and since you'll have to cook sooner or later, you may as well rip that Band-Aid off ASAP. So go ahead and stock up on your staples and pick up something to make yourself a special meal. While this might seem like a small thing, it's important. If you have a special go-to snack handy or make your favorite meal, it really can help you get back into the groove much easier than if you put it off by eating pizza one night, Chinese takeout the next, then Five Guys burgers, and on and on and on. You can't run from it, so why bother trying? Just go ahead and cook. Let's keep it real. Aruba has one of the best restaurant scenes in the Caribbean, and trying out as many different spots as you can is a big part of the fun. But when you get back home, the food you eat will be very different, and unfortunately, they'll most likely be prepared by you. Now, I suggest you start out by making the most comforting of comfort foods and go from there. Now, don't do anything overly complex. You're going to want to build up to making that 7-course meal. Just make it something that you'll enjoy both preparing and eating. I know this sounds kind of boring, but really, after spending all the time dining out in Aruba, preparing a meal in your own kitchen goes a long way towards helping you not only settle back into a routine, but also eating normal, healthy-ish meals. Ugh. Let's face it, there's some basic chores you have to do, and depending on how long you've been gone and what time of year it is, yard work may be at the top of the list. Now, if you've been gone more than 2 weeks, chances are you already made arrangements, but anything less than that, unless it was just a weekend getaway, you most likely have some upkeep to do, or risk having your HOA getting on your case. Seriously, this happened to me once a bunch of years back. I was on a cruise plus land vacation and returned home to a nasty letter in my mailbox. I still occasionally flip that guy the bird when I go past his house. Probably not the best idea since he's a cop, but hey, cops are people too. And no matter what your chore of choice is, it's best to just jump in and do it, as anything that helps establish a normal routine will go a long way to beating post-Aruba Sadness Disorder. But beating PASD isn't just about getting into a normal routine. You also want to have some fun. After all, real life doesn't suck. It's just not as awesome as Aruba. Seriously, remember what it is that you love about your real life. Whether it's pets, hobbies, family members, or a stroll around the neighborhood. Do something that reminds you that your real life is pretty darn good as well. This will mean something different for everyone listening. For me, it's getting Baltimore crab cakes, which are the best in the world. Chilling out with my kitty cat Claire, catching up on The Walking Dead, or best of all, talking to you guys via this podcast. All of those things work to varying degrees, but those are my things. You also have things. Go and do them. Now. And once you realize that real life is also pretty awesome, you can get back to reliving your vacation. So go through your photos. Time is of the essence. If you wait too long to download and share your Aruba photos, you run the risk of losing a bit of that magic. While looking at vacation photos is always fun, there's something really special about doing it fresh off a trip. Don't do what I've done far too many times and sit your camera bag in a corner collecting dust. Schedule aside a couple of hours for you to organize your pictures. As the saying goes, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. Share, and share some more. Whether it's your family, friends, coworkers, people on Facebook, Twitter followers, or whatever your preferred method, celebrate your adventures. So many of us post every day while on vacation and then stop cold turkey when we return home. That's a big mistake. Keep sharing even after you get home, as it helps wean you off that vacation euphoria without just shutting the spigot off. Ending a vacation can be a bit like stopping caffeine, cigarettes, or sugar. Doing so abruptly might not be the best way to go about things. Trust me, I know. About 5 or so years ago, I quit a 10-plus year smoking habit, cold turkey. Crazy dreams, headache, restlessness, and mood swings. And that was nothing compared to withdrawing from Aruba. Basically, it's just important to remember that while you're attempting to readjust to real life, you also have to reflect and share the details of your Aruba vacation with your family and friends. Not only for your benefit, but also because if you're listening to me right now, you probably think Aruba is the best place on earth. So go ahead and be that ambassador. Share your photos, your experiences, and your stories of one happy island. It's therapeutic. And luckily, when all else fails, the number one way to get over post-Aruba Sadness Disorder is by planning your next trip there. I always say no one goes to Aruba just once. There's always a next time. Whether your last trip was your first or your 100th, the common theme amongst us Arubophiles is there's always a next trip. When absolutely nothing else is working, just go ahead and plan another one. You don't necessarily have to book it, but just the act of planning out a future trip to the island can help you shake post-Aruba Sadness Disorder. My next trip will be coming up in maybe 4 or 5 months, and although I won't even be able to book my flight for another month or two, you better believe the planning usually starts on the flight home from the current trip. That one never fails. So those were some of the best ways I can think of to cure post-Aruba Sadness Disorder. Do you have a particular routine you go through in order to get out of a funk and back on track? If so, I would love to hear about it. But this time, I'm going to ask you to do something a bit differently. Leave your comments in the Facebook thread in the secret group for this podcast. And if you aren't yet a member of the group, you can email me at kurt@onehappypodcast.com. That's Kurt with a C. Or just hit me up on Facebook. Invites have just started to go out, and I'll continue to do so. But by letting me know you're interested, I'll be sure to move you to the front of the line. Now, we went over a lot in this episode, but if you missed something, don't worry, because as always, I took the notes so you don't have to. And they can be viewed at onehappypodcast.com/EP44. Onehappypodcast.com is kind of like the headquarters for everything podcast related, so check it out. There you can view the show notes for this and every other episode of the show, archives of past episodes, blog posts, the resource page, and all sorts of other great things. We have that newsletter coming out in the next 2 weeks, so make sure you sign up for that. There really are some cool things going on over there. Now, I loved spending this time with you guys, and I'll be back shortly with a review of my past trip to Aruba. But in the meantime, hit the music.